Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Outer Rim. We have a lot to discuss today. It's going to be a packed episode. We've got a lot of content to look at, so we're going to jump right in. But first, I'm Eric. I'm here with Lou, Tim, and Tom. Tom, how you doing today?
I feel like we just saw each other, Eric.
I really do.
Just a few hours ago, but I'm good.
I bet that's because we did a watch together, which we recorded for our Patreon donors. If you're a bonus or premium member of Patreon, you are going to get an audio file that you can, it's kind of like when you get audio commentary through, other podcasts or riff tracks or something like that, where you can queue it up with the beginning of your episode that you're watching. And you can listen to us as we watch the episode with you. So we kind of gave our thoughts running through the episode as we watched it, like Lou, Tim, and I did last week. So for our Patreon donors out there, that's going to be an ongoing thing. Go to randomchatter.com/Patreon. And, I've got to update the website with that as being a perk. We've got to add that into the website because it's not listed there. But if you're hearing this right now, that's a real thing. OK, and we're going to keep doing that for The Mandalorian. And I imagine, Tim, when the Marvel stuff comes out, do you guys plan to do a similar thing with the Marvel stuff?
We haven't talked about it yet, but I can definitely imagine that we will be. Okay. It's a lot of fun to do it and to, just that excitement. And even though it's not our first time watching it, because our first time we actually want to pay attention. Right. But it's still fun to just kind of talk through these episodes and point things out. Mm-hmm. And because we really don't talk about it that much collectively beforehand. I mean, there might be a few texts or something here and there, right? With The Mandalorian. So there's oftentimes things that like we're pointing out to each other that we didn't notice, or just taking 15 seconds to talk about a character or something that pops up, and it's good. It's fun stuff. So yeah, I think we'll definitely be doing that with the MCU stuff. Cool.
Well, I tell you what, if you guys don't, I think other staff members might. And that's the nice thing about the bonus content too, is we can always bring in other people. It doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily tied to a particular show, or at least it doesn't have to be. Like, this is kind of Outer Rim related when we do it for The Mandalorian, but anybody with Patreon access gets it. So we could bring in Carrie and Mike and Shannon and whoever else and do those. And later on, we talked about the fact we might do like more formalized commentary and stuff later. But for now, I think the watch throughs we're going to keep doing because they're a lot of fun. Tom and I had a great time last night. Lou, you and Tim were notably absent, but we missed you.
Yeah, gone, but not gone. But
you can't have the A team all the time. So,
I see how it's going to be. Lou, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Hey, that's copyrighted, and we're on YouTube now, so we can't do that nonsense.
Yeah, but I can hum it though. I can.
All right.
You can butcher it appropriately, and the algorithm won't catch it.
Yeah, that's the thing. If the algorithm doesn't catch it, it means you did a really crappy job, Lou. All right. Well, let's jump in.
Joe in the chat, by the way, just asked who Murdoch was. We actually should figure out who's who.
Oh, wait, quick. I'm Face.
I'll be Hannibal.
No. Tom is Face. Sorry.
Damn it.
Yeah, I mean, let's be fair.
Okay, I'll be Murdoch since I'm the pilot.
Tom is definitely the prettiest of the four of us. That there's no doubt there.
Damn it.
And you are a pilot, Lou, so yeah.
Okay, I'll be the crazy one.
Howling Mad Lou.
I need hair like that. Let it grow out and just feather it down the back.
Right. Well, now that we've appropriately aged ourselves, and Lou's made himself even younger, let's get in. Thanks, Joe. Let's get into the episode. So this one was directed by Dave Filoni. By the way, spoilers, right? Because we are going to spoil the heck out of this episode. You need to have already watched The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 5. Titled The Jedi before listening or watching this episode. So, yeah, major spoiler. So this is directed by Dave Filoni. We've got some guest stars. We've got Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano, finally. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. We've also got Michael Biehn from Aliens and The Abyss and other things. Terminator, yeah. And he plays Lang, the gunslinger in The Village, in the settlement. I didn't recognize him until I didn't say this during the recording, but it wasn't until Tom mentioned it while we were doing the watch together. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? Because I'm watching, I'm like, that guy looks really familiar. I've seen him in like a billion other things. Well, I haven't. I've seen him in like 5 other things, all from the 80s. And it's Michael Biehn. I didn't catch that was him.
And all with a shotgun too, so they kept that.
Did he have a shotgun in The Abyss?
Probably, like in a deleted scene.
Yeah.
But this was a blaster shotgun, which made it that much more awesome. I absolutely loved it when he racked that thing. I'm like, it makes zero sense whatsoever in universe.
Well, it kind of does because like the blaster bolts, it's shooting out multiple bolts at once. Tom and I talked about this a little bit on the watch together. You don't ever see that in Star Wars when you see a shotgun-like thing. What was the example you gave from Rogue One?
Baze's got his heavy cannon. It's got the pump action, but it just fires a heavier bolt or a more powerful bolt.
Yeah, you get like a bigger plasma blast or something.
Video games.
But this was actual individual shards of blaster bolts coming out in like a scattergun pattern.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty badass. I laughed. I all out laughed when I saw it.
All right, let's get right to the elephant in the room. Ahsoka. We finally get Ahsoka. How many years did you say it was, Tom? 13 years?
Well, it's going on 13. She debuted in 2008. I think the movie came out springtime of 2008. That would have been the first time. So
this is the Clone Wars movie.
She's been floating around in the universe out there for quite a while.
And now we finally get to see her in live action. And what did you guys think? We're going to go around the room here real quick. I want to talk about, and you can pick this apart however you'd like. First, I want to talk about the appearance, the actual transition from animation to live action. And then separately, I want to talk about Rosario Dawson as being cast as Ahsoka and what we think of her performance, her vocal patterns, facial expressions, physicality, etc. So let's talk about just the animation to live action transition first. Lou, what were your thoughts as you're watching this and you finally get to see Ahsoka on the screen?
I was very impressed. I thought it was a good rendition. I thought Rosario did a great job with mannerisms and everything else. I mean, the voice obviously different, but I thought the character looked like I wanted to see, and I thought it was a great transition from animation to screen.
Tim, what did you think?
Excuse me.
He's all choked up.
Much of the same.
Yeah.
No, much of the same. I thought it was a great transition. I think they definitely captured the look and the essence and everything that we wanted, and it was just an incredible visual introduction to her, with her basically hunting these guys in this fog, just popping up here and there. 2 lightsabers dead, lightsabers off. Then she just appears someplace else, and it was awesome. It wouldn't take much to make that a horror film. Just saying.
I don't know whether that's a compliment or an insult. That's
a compliment.
Okay. Tom, what did you think of the transition from animation to live action?
It was, I ended up in a good place. It was a little jarring at first. I did not expect to see her as quickly as we did. I'm glad that they showed her right out of the gate like that. I remember sitting there thinking like, oh, well, she's here now. She's just a thing. So your brain didn't even have a chance to prep itself. And it was a little like watching Solo for the first time and seeing somebody other than Harrison play Han. So your brain just has to catch up. And I think it's sort of like that on steroids, because Ashley Eckstein has played Ahsoka really for more hours in total than Mark Hamill has appeared as Luke or Harrison Ford as Han. So it's quite the change. But I really, really came away liking it, and I hope we see more of her.
You know, I think that's something that's important to point out too, is that there's that initial kind of psychological jolt when you see her in live action for the first time, and then separately, like I wasn't expecting it either. I think, you know, at the beginning of the episode, it's like this burned out planet, and I'm like, oh, well, this isn't Corvus. This is really, my initial thoughts were, we're going to have yet another episode of him stopping somewhere on the way to where he needs to be. And I had my phone out and I'm doing something. I hear lightsabers. I'm like, what? I literally didn't catch the first shot of her being on screen the first time around. I caught it audibly and not visually, because I'm like, okay, well, you know, I've got a billion things I've got to be doing. And I pulled my phone out for a second and I hear lightsabers. I'm like, holy crap. Like right at the beginning of the episode, she's there. I was not expecting that either. I think
it surprised me too.
But the transition from animation to live action, I thought was great. I thought that there is that adjustment your brain has to make. But then, and especially on the second watching, it felt natural. And I have to say, so to the casting, I think Rosario Dawson, at first, it was a little bit distracting, and I knew it would be, because my brain was, you know, breaking the fourth wall on its own. It's looking at the making of instead of the story content. It's like, okay, so Rosario Dawson is Ahsoka. Is she doing it right? Did they get the makeup right? My brain is going into analysis mode instead of like, quote, watching the show. So it took a while for that to adjust. Once it adjusted, like, it's fine. She's Ahsoka. Like, I think she nailed the performance. I think the vocal patterns and vocal style was the hardest to get through because it wasn't Ashley. But it was close. It was good. Yeah. And you could see, so especially on the second viewing, I paid more attention to it. And you can see ways in which she is, you can tell she watched a lot of Ashley's footage and kind of tried to pattern the speech style a little bit after what Ashley did with Ahsoka. Because especially if you look at Rosario Dawson in other things that she's done, there's a little bit of a difference, and you can tell that she worked with that. So I think the vocal thing was the thing that was a little bit hardest to get through, just because we already have a precedent set for that. But the physicality was on spot. The facial expressions, the emotion, the presence, nailed it. Like in every way, I was completely satisfied. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, she had there's in animation, there is a little smirk. It's a very subtle smirk that they give to Ahsoka, and she landed that spot on.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a really subtle thing, but it was there, and I'm like, it's so great. It's wonderful that they have, the makeup is right and all this other stuff is right. But to pick up little subtle things like that, I think actually makes a big difference when you notice it.
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson, I mean, she's a great actress. I got to say, probably, my big body of knowledge of her actually comes from her doing the Defender stuff on Netflix, the Marvel stuff, as Claire Temple. And she has an incredible physicality to her. I was really excited when she got cast in this, or at least when the rumors came about that she was cast in this, which I think finally got confirmed yesterday. I think.
Was it official?
Was the actual confirmation that we got?
The worst kept secret in Star Wars.
I'm thrilled with this.
Yeah.
I'm really thrilled with this casting. I think it's great.
And there were a lot of folks out there that probably rightfully so were wary of anybody but Ashley playing the character. And you think about, there's a significant chunk of the fan base that have literally grown up with Ashley as Ahsoka, with this one representation of her.
Right.
It's sort of like, if an original trilogy fan, that was in the theaters as a little kid for A New Hope, suddenly got to, was forced to watch
someone else playing Han,
or somebody else step into this.
Yeah,
exactly. And for those folks, there was a mix of emotions, I think, even when the casting rumor got floated. And in spite of sort of all of the ancillary conversations that were going on, I think objectively you can say that Rosario, in her performance, clearly took the character seriously, clearly walked into it not as an actor that, hey, I'm the big shot here, I'm the A-lister or whatever, I'm going to make this character my own. It was the mannerisms and stuff that Tim and Eric are talking about reflect her taking the character seriously and recognizing the importance of that character to so many fans. And there are going to be folks that just don't like her performance, and that's okay. But what you can't walk away from is saying that she didn't approach it doing her level best to nail that the sound and the look of that character from 7 odd seasons of Clone Wars.
And Ashley has earned the loyalty of the fans, I think. I mean, she did a great job. She also took the character very seriously. And Ahsoka is probably the most fan-revered expanded universe character that has ever shown up, with Thrawn being the possible exception. I mean, Thrawn and Ahsoka are the two. She's the hero, Thrawn's the villain. I mean, she is the character that is most recognizable who didn't appear in a film by far.
It's a huge risk trying to translate a character like that. Just I mean, and they could have done it any other way. And that's why I think we'll get into it, but I don't think it was an attempt to cash in on something to include her. She's part of a bigger plan thematically and story wise that we'll see unfold.
And Lou, what are your thoughts on, did you think that Rosario Dawson was the right choice? And then what are your thoughts on I don't even want to say controversy. I just want to say, what are your thoughts on the fan perspective that it would have been nice to see Ashley do it instead of casting it as someone else?
Yeah, my first reaction to it was, I really wanted to see Ashley do this. But, Ashley is not a live action actress. And, making that transition would have been probably harder for her than bringing somebody else in to kind of duplicate what Ashley's done and the animators have done on screen. So I thought in that respect, that was good. I mean, I guess I was more maybe sad or nostalgic for Ashley because I thought, that's her character. She really owns that, and she portrays that, and she signs things Ahsoka when she signs them and so forth.
Almost like, how does it feel to her as a person?
Exactly.
But I mean, she is still Ahsoka. She's still going to have far more hours as Ahsoka than Rosario Dawson may ever have.
Yeah.
So, she is also still Ahsoka, to be fair.
Yep.
Yeah. But otherwise, I think Rosario did a great job. I mean, I'm happy she's done this, and I think that she's brought the character to the screen the way we wanted to see it to the screen. The only thing I was detracting from me is in the makeup. Well, it was awesome makeup. The head tails kind of had some wrinkles on them. That's something you never see in the animation.
Yeah.
So it distracted me a little bit, but that's just whatever production.
We talked about that a little bit in the watch together last night. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, and I think that there are kind of some allowances that you need to make to go from animation to live action, and and that's one of them. And the thing is, I mean, it's either an additional detail or it is a quote error, if you will.
I think it was intentional.
So
I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of either way you want to weigh it. Some people are going to say, oh, well, it's wrong because that's not the canonical image that we've had for 13 years. Other people are going to say, well, it is because it's, all we were seeing before was animation. I mean, I'm more inclined to say, well, it is. I mean, I'm and Tom, I'm not saying that it's a nitpicky thing. It's an observation, and I think it's a worthwhile observation to point those things out, and I think really to say it's okay.
So in the animation,
there's nothing wrong with that,
especially in Rebels, everything. Well, no, as much in Clone Wars as well. Everything was very smooth and blocky and very stylized. So in live action, you're going to have more realistic things. You're going to have texture on someone's skin. You're going to have different little nuances like that. And I think that the wrinkles they're not Laku, but we'll call it that because they're similar to a Twi'lek's Laku. But the wrinkles in them, I guess, to me, like, it was a little bit distracting at first because I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. But it different. Makes me think maybe this is an indication that she's older.
Watch it.
I didn't say as old as you, Lou. I just meant like older, like in a normal way.
She's not qualifying for Jedi Social Security.
Right. Yet. I mean, come on. So, I think it was supposed to reflect that the character's aged a little bit, and just, a skin-like texture that's not supposed to look like cloth. It's not supposed to look like plastic.
Yeah,
I think it looked more realistic this way.
I think it would have been a little more jarring to just have them sort of perfect there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing was when you see her go from Clone Wars to Rebels, the head tails grow, and certainly if you look at a character like Shakti from Revenge of the Sith, she's much older than Ahsoka at that point in the Clone Wars, and her head tails are longer. Her head tails are noticeably shorter in this show, almost akin to the length that they were toward the beginning of the Clone Wars. And I have to believe that anybody that gets hung up on the look of the Clone Wars or Rebels as being canonical, I think you have to just kind of turn that part of your brain down a little bit, because the look of Rebels obviously was radically different than Clone Wars. And the creators, to include Filoni, have all said, these are just interpretations of what it would look like. None of this is the gospel, so to speak, in terms of the character appearances.
Yeah.
And
it was just something I noticed, and in your head.
But there were a lot of people that were pointing that out and saying that, hey, I don't like this character and her representation on screen, in part because this doesn't seem like her. And I think the length, I am sure, and maybe we'll see some of this in the when the Gallery series debuts for season 2. I'm sure they toyed with a variety of different styles to include longer lengths, but the difference is Shakti didn't really move around on screen. She just sort of stood there.
And for all we know, Shakti is like 600 years old. Like
that's true.
We don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
Easy.
Not as old as you. Listen, you don't need to be so defensive about it. It's okay. It's okay. You are still a contributing member of society, even at your age. It's fine.
It's fine. You'll earn your forever sleep.
You will. Wow, that got dark fast.
It did.
With her flipping and doing all sorts of fighting and whatnot, you need something that's functional as well. And the last thing that they would want is to somehow be beholden to, some other, on-screen version, and then have the best they're able to do just be really weird looking. Yeah,
I mean, that's the other thing. The action shots, you don't want her tripping over her Laku and stuff.
Or them just like awkwardly flopping.
Flapping around, getting chopped off by a lightsaber as she's spinning him around. Yeah, that would be bad. So the scenes, we'll touch briefly on the scenes, but we have a lot of other stuff to get to as well. So the choreography, the physicality of the character, we liked that too. Yes, no, any thoughts?
That opening sequence where she's sort of appearing and disappearing in and out of the fog may be one of my favorite in any live action Star Wars. It was just really awesome. Like Tim said, you could have made it into a horror movie, but we haven't seen anything like that. Somebody with using lightsabers in that way to sort of fade in and fade out. You always have like Luke with it ignited until the battle's over.
Right.
And then they put it away. Here there's almost like a tactical sense to it where she doesn't have any cover like we talked about last night.
Right.
It's just a bunch of burnout trees, but she's using the fog as concealment.
Exactly.
And the one thing that would break that would be the 2 white lightsabers.
Yeah. That was very cool. Yeah, on, slice, off, on, slice, off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the fight at the end, too. Well, and actually the fight with her and Din Djarin, I thought, was, as brief as it was,
oh, it was fantastic.
Really intense. And by the way, we now have it in canon that Beskar deflects lightsabers. Yeah. This is the first time. It's been in Legends for ages. And this is the first time that it's been made canon. So...
And that was really kind of the crux of why the Mandalorians were such a threat to the Jedi, because when the Jedi fought them, they couldn't get through their armor, or at least easily. So, that was a big thing. And we saw just from that brief encounter how much of a difference that made.
Right.
I mean, fortunately, he had, the forearm gauntlets, and that's what saved his butt. Otherwise, he would have, been armless and then headless.
Call him a stumpy.
So,
yeah.
you think about it, there have been a lot of plot lines involving the search for a material that could be mass produced that would be lightsaber resistant. So in the Clone Wars, you had the Zillo Beast episodes where they're trying to figure out a way to kill the beast, and then backwards engineer its armor to be able to, because it's not just blaster proof, but it's lightsaber proof. And Palpatine's in the center of it. And then in the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan book, and in the one of the Thrawn books, you have this search for different materials that are lightsaber proof. And in fact, in the Thrawn book, you have alliances, you actually have clone armor that's being developed that's lightsaber proof, and Anakin stumbles upon it. It's like, what's this? This must just be stolen by the Separatists. But so it's key, and I think it's probably one of the reasons why the Empire is hoarding it. They're not out there wheeling and dealing in Beskar and using it as currency. They're stockpiling it for a reason.
Yeah. I wonder if the Dark Troopers are going to have...
There's precedent.
All right. Tom in the chat room, anybody get Kill Bill Volume 1 vibes from the fight at the end? A little bit. But I think the Kill Bill Volume 1, the fight at the end was probably also like looking back for inspiration at the same places that this got inspiration from.
Yeah, it was very, we got the Western vibe from this episode more so than any other episode in the season.
Yeah.
It was just really, really clear, that the one-on-one face-offs that we saw, standing in the basically the dead street with no one else around, who's going to draw their weapon first kind of thing. I mean, absolutely just like signature stereotypical Western kind of thing. And it was cool. And it gives you that tension, and, your hero's going to win. Even if he shoots second, he still has the Beskar. And we saw from the last episode, he can take an awful lot of hits. It probably still hurts him like hell.
But it's interesting.
He can take an awful lot of hits.
Because you've got, in one scene, you've got the Western, and then you have a wall with the door, and then you have the hidden fortress. Like you've got the Kurosawa influence too. They're talking about that here in the chat room. Fetmatic and Joe and Tom. You've kind of got both of those simultaneously separated by a wall. And then the other cool thing is, the gunslinger guy, what was his the character's name? Lang is listening to what's happening in the other battle to try to determine how he should approach the Mandalorian. Like, am I winning and do I have the upper hand, or am I losing and I need to negotiate? And he's kind of gauging it, like literally with every step he's taking, trying to listen in to see how it's going. And I thought that was brilliant. I loved seeing both the Western gunslinger and the Kurosawa influences simultaneously going on in that scene. That was really good. And I thought the choreography was really good too. But we need to go back to the middle of the episode. because you have like this gelatinous slime, let's call it goo, and it grows, and so you have grow goo, right? is that what that's supposed to be? It's like a brand name for like little putty stuff that you'd get at Toys R Us or something.
They're going to be people that until the day they die are going to take the stance that they're going to call him Baby Yoda, and that Star Wars can pull it out of their cold dead hands.
I love that Ahsoka even corrects the Mandalorian. It's like Dave Filoni looking at the audience and saying, guys, it's Grogu. It's not kid.
Yeah.
It's Grogu.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Star Wars has so many silly names. Like, we're used to them now, but if you look back at Chewbacca, like if you had someone who'd never heard of Star Wars before and you say, oh, that character, his name is Chewbacca, they'd be like, Chew what? Like, it's just Chewy. That's, I mean, have you been biting him? It doesn't make any sense. Han Solo is not the world's greatest name. Jar Jar is certainly not the world's greatest name. These names are always kind of
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Kind of silly and dumb.
What the heck is that?
Right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of it, for this species, you know, you've got something with the Chiss, you've got Mithra Neurodo, and you have a whole like naming convention that fits the Chiss. And then for this species, you've got Yoda, Yaddle, Grogu. Like, they're phonetically very simple and duosyllabic. You know, just a couple syllables. Like, they're very, very simple names. It fits. But it's still weird. It doesn't bug me as much as Sheev Palpatine. I still can't do the Sheev thing. I don't think I've ever referred to him as Sheev. Like, it just, really? Who came up with that one?
Yeah.
But Grogu...
It's just the risk of making that a mystery. You know, the fans with a character like that are going to come up with their own way, you know, nicknames and that sort of thing.
And it also, the mystery also makes it so we build it up so much that no reveal is going to satisfy the bar that we've set inside our heads too.
Exactly. So I'm sure that people, when they first heard Yoda's name, are like, "Who? That's a ridiculous name." But with
we didn't have any anticipation for Yoda's name. We've had a season and a half of what's his name? What's his name? What's his name? What do we call him? We can't call him Baby Yoda, but we have to call him Baby Yoda because he's a Baby Yoda and he's so cute. It's so, like, what is it that we're supposed to call him? We had a season and a half of that. With Yoda, it's just, oh, there's a little shriveled green elf who needs hooked on phonics for Christmas. And
well, it was the opposite with Yoda. You knew his name, but you didn't know what he looked like. And so you're well, at least for a few minutes in the theater or as you're watching it, you're imagining this great warrior.
You imagine Qui-Gon Jinn.
You see this little green guy.
Basically, I mean, you're imagining this big Jedi wizard thing. Yeah. All right. What did you guys think of Grogu? Tim, what are your thoughts on the name?
It was fine. I mean, basically, like you said, it's Star Wars, so we just kind of have to roll with what they give us. I mean, yeah. I mean, when we look back at some of these other names that we're now just very used to, is it really that odd? Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I was actually surprised that we got a name. That was probably the biggest thing for me. Was I fully did not expect to get a name or even any measure of a kind of a backstory that we got on him, which we did, and so I loved that. That was the thing to me that I appreciated most out of this, was just kind of that silent interaction that we had between Grogu and Ahsoka, as Ahsoka was getting these impressions from him, you know, telepathically and through his feelings and that kind of stuff. And they also didn't feel compelled to like explain everything. It was like, okay, he was at the Jedi Temple, the purge happened, he disappeared, yada, 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 you found him. I mean, that's pretty much what they did. They're like, she even acknowledged like, hey, there's this blank spot, shrug, don't know. And that's fine. They don't have to explain everything to us. We don't need that.
Yeah. All right. Lou, what are your thoughts?
You know, I think about the same as Tim. I thought it fit. I thought it was fine. We got a little bit more information out of it, but I'm happy to, kind of just go with the flow.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's going to take me a while to get used to calling him Grogu, though.
We'll come up with a
It sounds like
nickname. I'm sure that'll get...
Yeah, we'll have a nickname. We'll call him like something like the Child
Little G.
or Baby Yoda. I think either of those.
GG.
Baby G.
Baby G.
I just...
That's his rapper name.
I don't know. Any name with goo in the title just... It reminds me like a monster name or something. Like something you would call a Godzilla villain or something. Godzilla versus Grogu. Like it just... I don't know.
I kept thinking of the Gorgon.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not making fun of it. But back to what you were saying about seeing Ahsoka, Tom, seeing Ahsoka live action for the first time and how your brain has to adjust. I'm definitely going to have to adjust to the name, even if I think the name is fine, and I do. I think the name is perfectly okay. I think it fits. It's going to take me ages to get used to it now. And the funny thing is, if they'd given us the name up front, it wouldn't, because it would have been associated with this character's identity from day one. But now we get all the way into halfway through season 2, more than halfway through season 2, to get the name. And it's like, yeah, but that's not who he is. He's Baby Yoda.
Yeah. I really like the way that played out, how that information got revealed, because you have Mando sort of off pacing back and forth, just looking in on this like wizard stuff that he doesn't understand. Right. And he's probably got his own thought process, but she's communing with Grogu, and it's almost like a mixture of Yoda and Anakin sitting together, or any of the scenes that we've seen in the past where you have this sort of silent communication between Force users, and getting to find out that our concept of Baby Yoda up to this point has been he's a cute little guy that kind of has some powers and he eats all the time. Nobody had any clue that, even though it makes sense time-wise, that he would have been around during the Clone Wars. And the fact that he was at the Jedi Temple in close proximity with folks like Yoda and other Jedi.
Yeah, let's talk about that backstory a little bit. So she says many masters have trained him. Who? And does that mean that he's had many like one-on-one masters, or does that just mean, when he was done with his math class, they packed up the books and he walked across the hall to English class or whatever? Obviously not English, or he didn't pay attention.
I think it's just simply, I think it's a function of the academy.
Okay.
I mean,
so you think it's just kind of moving from...
Yeah, I mean, when you go to college, you go from class to class to class. You have different masters, professors who are teaching you different things. I have someone who's teaching me science, someone else who's teaching me, history.
But there's also a reference to...
I think that's simply a function
to having a master as being a master's Padawan as well. But I'm guessing... Right, I'm kind of leaning toward what you're implying, Tim, that he wasn't necessarily... he was a youngling, but not a Padawan. Like he didn't have a master that he served under, right?
Yeah. I think even though he was around back then, he wasn't quite old enough to have reached Padawan status. That seems to be in your... I
mean, he was only like
early teen years.
50 or something. I mean, not old enough yet.
Well, you think he's definitely not at the level like, Ahsoka was a new Padawan at age, 12, 13. And so he's, at least developmentally not at that stage yet. So Tim's saying, I think, makes a lot of sense. And quite frankly, you probably while you had a few, Jedi who were no doubt assigned to the temple, as the war dragged on, you had more and more that would have cycled into battle or by necessity been called forward to action. And so, a master that he is teaching him, I don't know, science today is out on the battlefield because of losses of other Jedi tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If you look at after episode 2, the Jedi Council was smaller and there were fewer Jedi, and all that. So another thing that was said was that he was hidden at the time of the purge. Kind of curious, hidden by whom and where. And the thing is, he's such a popular character. I have no doubt that there's going to be a comic book series. There's going to be a novel. There's going to be something at some point, you know, right, Lou? They have to fill in
eventually. That'll
they have to take away all the mystery, right? Because we can't have that. No. So I'm a little curious.
That's actually a story that I would
snuck him out.
You know, if they do it with the same level of, you know, attention that the Kanan comic got and showing his backstory, I'm all for that. You want to make it a comic or a book, I'll read it.
That was a good series. The other thing too, later in the episode, not that much later, it was when they were doing the rock trick. And then, you know, he got his little baby Death Star knob from, she's saying, I sense much fear in you, which is the same thing Yoda said to young Anakin. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that wasn't a very intentional line put in there, not just to, you know, as a throwback to episode 1. I'm wondering if it's not signaling something else, too, because we've seen some darker moments with the child. Now, he's young, and so by definition, he's going to be a little bit selfish, because children are. Mm-hmm. But the first time he's introduced to Cara Dune, and there's the arm wrestling, and then he starts to force choke her, and then he's been exposed to a lot of violence. I'm wondering if there may be signaling that he's got a little bit of darkness in him. Like, you know, they train Anakin and Anakin went bad, and now Ahsoka's like, well, therefore we're going to not train this guy. But there's always been that argument. Well, if you don't at least try, aren't they still likely to go bad anyway?
I think she sees, and she alludes directly to Anakin in all of this, and it's like a really emotional line. Mm-hmm. You know, it can happen to the best of us. Mm-hmm. She didn't know Anakin's full backstory and sort of this pathway that he took involving his mother, but there's a direct parallel there, right? You know, this fear of loss and attachment to his mother was the entire reason why Yoda was hesitant to train Anakin from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. Right. And it was the thing that started him down that path. And you clearly see that level of bond and attachment purely by happenstance that's developed. I mean, there's almost no way that it could not have, given everything that they've been through. But Ahsoka sort of viscerally realizes that, and I think sees the problems that it can lead to. Yeah. The comment that I made last night was, it's a little confusing to me because Din doesn't know about Jedi training. He doesn't know, you know, how any of that works, or acceptance or rejection of a Padawan, any of that. His task, as the armorer gave it to him, was to deliver him to the Jedi or to his kind. And for Din to sort of sit there, and I almost expected him to push back and say, well, what do I care about him getting trained? I've delivered him to you. My task is complete. The way it makes sense to me, as I watched it through a second time, is you get this vibe of like a proud dad of his kid. He wants his kid to he knows his kid. He's seen his kid in action. His kid's got skill, and he wants her to see that. Right. And there's this, he doesn't understand what she's talking about in terms of training, but he understands the acceptance rejection mechanism. Yeah. And the judgment mechanism. And he wants Baby Yoda, or Grogu, to step up and prove himself. And you see that in the business with the rock and the handle there. So I was still a little confused. You know, she's giving him the task at the end to take Baby Yoda elsewhere. I'm just going to keep saying
it's going to take a while.
My brain fixes it. But you almost are wondering, like, well, okay, I guess I'm voluntarily doing this because as far as I'm concerned, my task is complete.
Yeah.
I think that Ahsoka was also realizing her own limitations.
Yeah.
And there's a few layers here. First of all, she's not a master. And given the fact, I mean, it's one thing for Luke to have been trained in without the structure of the academy and the council and a gazillion Jedi and all that stuff. One day to just say, you know what? Hey, I'm a master. Sure, I'm good. I'm cool. I can wear this black jumpsuit. I'm badass. For Ahsoka to say, I mean, in Ahsoka's mind, as far as what she knows, she barely became a Jedi Knight because of all the crap that was, that occurred for her trials.
Mm-hmm.
So for her to say, I can't take on this kid's training, so she probably had this conflict in her over that, plus zero help, because she doesn't know Jedi training outside of that big academy environment with all that infrastructure and all these masters and a council to tell you if someone is ready or they're not ready or any of that.
She doesn't have a giant tree with a bunch of really old books.
Yeah. and she, and then probably the other issue is she's like, hey, I'm on this mission. I'm doing a thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big part of it.
I do not have time to babysit. And if it was someone who was a little more able to take care of themselves, maybe. Yeah. Although then, of course, there's the whole issue of, well, they're too old and they didn't have enough training to begin with. And now there's kind of that same training situation kind of with Luke.
Well, you could argue, though, that he was at the temple, and this is just a resumption of the training he had already gotten. Like he started out at the temple.
Yeah, but in this episode, she had a lot of acknowledgement that, even though he had that experience, where he's at now is very different, because of what he went through in the purge and all that kind of stuff. And then now with the sudden this attachment that she has to Jin, she even says, "Hey, you're basically became his father."
Also, she's not a Jedi anymore, too. That's the other thing to keep.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
true.
She's not in that world. She doesn't want to be in that world. She doesn't want the responsibility. She is distanced herself from the Jedi.
And it's interesting too that, and this is another thing we mentioned last night. The way that Filoni presents Ahsoka in this episode is brilliant, because if you are not familiar with Clone Wars or Rebels, you know nothing about this character. And The Mandalorian's brought in a lot of new viewers to Star Wars who have only seen the movies and nothing else.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So they don't know who Ahsoka is.
Some people who haven't even seen the movies.
That's true.
Honest.
I know some of them. Viewers. Yeah. It's so you have to introduce, people are seeing the lightsabers. They're like, oh, this is a Jedi. They don't know Ahsoka's backstory, and this is not the place to tell it. So we didn't get an origin story. We didn't get a montage of background like we did with Cobb Vanth. And at the point where, Mandalorian says, my quest was to bring him to a Jedi, I was expecting Ahsoka to say, well, I'm not a Jedi anymore. Filoni doesn't do that. Instead, he says, the Jedi Order is gone. So
yeah, and I hung on that also, because I was like, what's she gonna say? Because she was really adamant the last few times we saw her that she is not a Jedi.
So it fulfills
that's
that
a very specific label.
It fulfills that without confusing the new viewers. That was brilliant.
Yeah. Because it's a nuance. And I think in so many cases there has been this, even in the fandom, this propensity to call a Force user who isn't a Sith a Jedi. It's just kind of this assumption. There's Jedi and there's Sith. And without even getting into the discussion of gray Jedi, which some people have aneurysms over. There are Force users who are not necessarily aligned with either one of those. And so, is there just a word? And ultimately, in the end, I mean, even from what we've seen in The Mandalorian, they are solely collectively referred to as the Jedi. There's no discern, even with the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anyone who has mentioned them has never said, find a Jedi, but hey, be careful. If they have one of those red lightsabers, you need to run.
Right.
Because that is not it. No one said that.
Or hey, that's an alternative. If you can't find a Jedi,
find a Sith. Find somebody.
Just dump him off.
Yeah. Kick him to the curb. So Lou, you and I do movie chatter together, and on movie chatter we talk a lot about directors. Any thoughts on Filoni in this episode?
Other than the fact that it felt very Filoni.
It did.
You know, it was good. It was a direct extension for him from, you know, animated to this. Now, was this his first foray into live action?
No, he did one in the first season.
Oh, that's right, he did. Yeah, but other than these two, he's never done anything else.
I think this is only a second.
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, this fit perfectly for him. I thought it was great that he did this episode, given, you know, his character and so forth.
There were so many shots in this episode where I'm like, you could pause that and make it a poster, make it your iPhone home screen, make it your Windows background. Like so many just well-framed shots in this episode.
He's got a great eye.
He really does.
There was a distinctive difference. Not that the other directors are bad by any measure, or that Filoni is somehow great, even though he's directed less than a feature film worth of footage.
Of live action footage.
But you can see, you can see the eye that he has for these shots. And it's very like Rian Johnson-esque in terms of, I think you could take any individual shot or sequence in this and kind of pick it apart and find the cinematic influences on it, the same way you can pick apart The Last Jedi or the original trilogy in the same way. And, you know, I just like that. I think he did a great job. There were folks that were critical of, you know, his work and some of the creative choices here. But you think about the grand scheme of all the episodes that we've had so far. This is probably the most high stakes, other than maybe the intro, Baby Yoda. And so he bit off a lot in taking this one on. And I really think he did a fantastic job.
I think a lot of the framing of the shots has to do with him being an animator. For those who don't know, he didn't just come in and run the Clone Wars. He has a background in drawing. Like he's an artist. And I think that there's got to be something about knowing what to put on a piece of paper when you draw and doing that well, and then getting that onto screen, because that's basically what you're doing. You're taking, you know, what's on the camera is basically a piece of paper on its side, and you're trying to fit the important things in that panel, if you want to use comic book references, and making sure that you know where people's eyes are going to focus and eliminating excess clutter. I think there's just a background there that translates well into live action that is helping him quite a bit. I think that he is, a lot of people were wondering whether or not he'd make that transition well, and I think he's done brilliantly. I think he's got a real future in live action directing.
It's art composition. It's, you know, my dad was an art teacher for 30 plus years, and he, you know, his constant refrain, even as he's taught more advanced classes and computer animation and stuff, is you've got to have the basics down. I mean, it's like you pick your sport, and you can't be Michael Jordan without learning to dribble first and understanding the basics like that. And he's certainly got those down. If you follow him on Twitter or Instagram, you've seen just how great an artist he is and the vision that he has for these things. So it was nice to again see that shine through.
Lou, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
The battle at the end between Ahsoka and the Magistrate. Ahsoka wins. Ahsoka has a question. She wants to know where someone is.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yes. Yes. She does.
Hush.
Tim, quiet. Yes, me, Tim.
I'm asking Lou, Tim.
You know, so everything about this episode was great. We had a lot of reveals. We had a lot of little nuggets here and there, and mainly more questions than answers. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the questions. And I said this right before we started recording. I kind of wish The Mandalorian would get on with its own thing instead of keep introducing stuff we're going to get in other series and other things.
And we're going to break that down in just a minute here. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like a vehicle just to do other stuff, but I'm really excited about the name they threw out there. Tim, I'm going to say it before you get to say it. Thrawn.
Who?
But
wait,
it makes me worried that, we have so much stuff to wrap up and so much stuff that we've started pulling threads on that we have 3 episodes left this season. And I hope we get another 10 seasons of Mandalorian because we have so much stuff to cover.
Yeah. And I have a funny feeling that the next episode is going to reveal even more threads. I'll come back to that.
You think so? Okay.
So,
but yeah, no, I'm excited about the whole Thrawn reveal. I mean, we're all big Thrawn fans here. I think all of us, we each try to kind of one up each other as far as who's the bigger Thrawn fan. But Tim just blows his horn louder than the rest of us.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, I was a Thrawn fan before Tim probably even knew who Thrawn was.
As a little side
I was just
note,
not delusional
really?
about whether or not the sequel trilogy was going to be about Thrawn. I think that's where a lot of the noise.
Sure. Well, yeah, Tim wanted the Thrawn trilogy. Yeah, whatever. As a little side note, I know we're running long anyways, but we did our Zoom improv class the other night, and we did a scripted, unscripted thing where somebody reads lines from a book or a play, and the other person has to react to them, without knowing what's going on. So my wife and I did the scene together, and I was reading from Thrawn Ascendancy.
Nice.
And
I would have loved to have participated in that.
Everybody in the class didn't know what was going on.
I need, why can't there be like virtual improv classes that because there's none around me, but if you're going to do them virtually anyway, then
if you're available on Wednesday nights at 8:00, I will give you an invite because we take anybody. Not that you're anybody. It's just
this Wednesday I can't, but next Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah. Pencil me in.
Consider yourself invited. I'll get you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the moment who's been a fan of the network for a long time has been waiting for. Tom, what did you think of? What did you think of Thrawn and the reveal that this is?
Tim's gonna melt if I talk for longer than 10 seconds.
He'll get over it.
It caught me completely by surprise. I did not realize my first time through that like the HK assassin droids had the 7th Fleet logo on their helmets.
Good catch on that. I mean, I'm sure you got it from the internet somewhere, but good catch.
Yeah.
I love the HKs, by the way. I thought they were really cool. I love to see them. I hope we see more of them. Mm-hmm. I love the acrobatic flip that the one did when he was jumping onto the roof.
Mm-hmm.
I was thrilled with that.
That was awesome. Yeah, throwback.
But no, it caught me off guard. I was not expecting it. I fully expected, and I don't get surprised in watching Star Wars often, but that was one of those pure moments where it's 4 a.m. and I was kind of half tipped over at that point, and then I shot bolt upright and was like, "What?"
Right,
and the wheels started turning.
Yeah. All right, so that's all the time we've got left for this episode of The Outer Rim.
Oh, great episode.
Tim, it looks like Thrawn is finally going to be coming to live action, which is what you and I have both been waiting for a long time. You've just been more vocal about it. And I've been trying to restrain my competitive nature about which of us is the bigger Thrawn fan. I actually meant to get my my little Thrawn action figure out here.
Well, one of us doesn't have to be more of a Thrawn fan than the other, Eric.
Well, that's good. You don't have to feel bad then.
Collectively, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's not.
You can both be Thrawn groupies.
Yeah,
so it's okay.
Thrawnies. Thrawnies.
You heard it here first.
So So seriously though, you're getting what you've been dying for all this time. You're getting him in live action. Now it's not on the big screen that we know of, but this inevitably preludes the fact that we are getting Thrawn live action.
Yeah, and we obviously, this has been telegraphed for the last 3 years. So I mean, we knew this was coming, and so this just progresses us a little bit further. And as Tom said, completely unexpected.
Yeah.
I mean, I fully figured that the magistrate's master was Gideon.
Yeah.
Just because of the storyline and all that stuff, I fully expected it. It was Gideon. I probably, had I taken a step back and thought, what is Ahsoka actually working on now? Because back to the end of Rebels, it very well could have been. But even then, still, just this connection of, okay, well, Thrawn has been gone, disappeared for years. Mm-hmm. So I'm really curious as to how this woman is connected to him.
So,
and even if she would know, and of course we didn't get to see what her answer was to Ahsoka. So we don't know if she knew anything about him. It also seems very odd because, like, and this is something that I mentioned on Discord yesterday, and that's that, you know, when we read the books, we're getting a certain Thrawn. Mm-hmm. And in the very little bit of exposure that we've gotten of Thrawn from Rebels, while they are certainly setting him up as something bigger than what they are superficially portraying, he is superficially portrayed as a villain simply because he is affiliated with the Empire. Right. And I'm hoping that they are able to adjudicate those issues, because I see this as very conflicting. And we saw what the magistrate did to this town. That is not something that Thrawn would do. That is not something that Thrawn would do. Mm-hmm. So there's a big disconnect here. And I'm not saying there's a disconnect in writing. I'm talking in universe. There's a disconnect. If the magistrate was somehow affiliated with Thrawn, those two are a world apart, because she was doing stuff that is not within his philosophy. Right.
So he wouldn't do it directly.
That's the thing.
But I think
you have to wonder how far removed is she from Thrawn.
It reminded me of you know, he's overseeing the TIE Defender project. How the sausage gets made at the end of the day was up to Arenda Price. And there was some, you know, they had refugees in encampments on the planet. They certainly had citizens pressed into labor. You had that episode where they're making speeder bikes and they're getting sabotaged, and he you know, forces that one farmer to get on the speeder bike that he sabotaged and blows him up. So I agree with you, Tim. I don't think if Thrawn were directly running that operation, you would see that. But it certainly plays into the, you know, hey,
he delegates.
We need an objective here.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to Corvus. I think it's not just a planet where there's this random, you know, settlement with somebody connected to Thrawn. I think there's some smokestacks in the background when you see one of the shots of the plant or the settlement. So I think whether this is a mining or some sort of assembly operation related to, you know, Starfleet building.
Starfleet.
There's something more important for this.
Live long and prosper.
The magistrate has.
Sorry.
Yeah. And the other side of it is that while obviously the denizens of this town seem to be innocent, they might not have been. We don't know the history of whatever this conflict was.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is that as well, and obviously we certainly have seen. Again, talking more about the books, Thrawn has put down populations very quickly and efficiently, who have been, you know, aggressive and subjugating others and that kind of stuff. So maybe there's something to that there. I don't know. It's an interesting
well, and
thing.
He also talks about, and I don't know how much character growth is going to come out of this too, but in this last book, I don't think this is a spoiler at all. I just recently finished up Chaos Rising, and he's comparing himself to Ar'alani to one of the other characters, and he talks about the fact that Ar'alani sees other people as people, whereas Thrawn sees them as assets. And so, I think there's a lot of delegation going on there. Not only is there the issue, I don't think a magistrate of a settlement reports directly to Thrawn. I really don't. There's got to be at least one other level in between them, if not several. So I think this is just a step in Ahsoka's getting to him.
Well, but she could be reporting to him in terms of, she had more going on than just the magistrate of that village, or maybe. Whatever. She was in production. She was doing, strip mining planets, and I think she's. Yeah,
she could have been bigger than what we saw.
Than we thought she was.
Yeah, and she held up against Ahsoka in fighting, and there's. She's got some kind of a backstory. So.
Oh yeah,
we don't need to know it, but I think she's
They mention enough. They give you enough of her backstory that you understand her character and the significance.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. Before we wrap up this episode, we do have to take a look at one more thing, and I know we're running long, but again, we knew that this episode was going to be like there's a lot of stuff to cover. Lou, you brought up a point earlier. There are a lot of plot threads. There are a lot of dangling threads in this season. And we just got another one with Thrawn. And we got an implication of one more that's coming that's not going to get resolved I guarantee it's not going to get resolved this season. So I'm going to break down the list here real quick of what we've got this season that still has to get wrapped up. So we've got the main quest of Din Djarin and Grogu, which has been progressing. But now they have to go to Tython, and Grogu has to meditate at this shrine at the top of a whatever, and then maybe that will cause other Jedi to seek him out, Ezra. So we've got that. We've got Moff Gideon and the Dark Troopers. That storyline has to get resolved. We've got Bo-Katan. Mm-hmm. Aligned with the Gideon storyline and the reallocation of the Darksaber. We've got Boba Fett, who keeps popping up and needs to get his armor back. Plus, he has to do something by the end of the season if we are going to, and this is speculation and rumor, if we're going to get the Boba Fett series allegedly entering production like next month and will be coming before season 3 of The Mandalorian. So I kind of predict that storyline's definitely going to be something we're going to see more movement on this season. And then we've got Ahsoka looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different, arguably major plot threads. We have 3 episodes left. And we don't even know if Tython is going to be the next episode or if Tython is going to be the climax story-wise of the season. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff to wrap up. Now, we talked before, too, about, and Lou, you've been pretty vocal about this as well. The show's called The Mandalorian. And yet there are all of these other things that keep getting introduced. And it's not uncommon in television, if you're going to spin something off or create a sister series, to kind of do what's the word for it? There's a phrase for it, but like a covert pilot episode in a different series.
Yeah.
So, Boba Fett could get his own series. Ahsoka, I would love to see Ahsoka get her own series. Like, the more I saw of Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka in this, I'm like, please give us a series with Ahsoka. I'm all in on that one. I want that. So we've got at least 2 different spin-off series here. You could spin a series off with Bo-Katan. I don't know. Maybe a lot of these are things that they want to spin off into other directions and create, as Den of Nerds has been talking about a lot, a Filoni-verse, which, I'm all in for that too. I think that would be great. But we do have to figure out what we're going to do this season.
Just because they bring a character in doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to get a spin-off.
Very true.
Especially these characters that are existing characters that all they're simply using them for are they're continuing the storylines of those characters. They are plot vehicles for further things in this show and maybe even facilitating other shows that may occur.
Right.
But just because they show up doesn't mean that they're going to get their own show.
That is absolutely very true.
I think. Yeah, so I think we also do need to temper that a little bit. Like, everyone just kind of needs to calm down.
No, I get that.
And they're also not going to do them all at once either. If they do, we're going to get one show at a time. We're going to get one spinoff first if we get any. But go ahead, Lou.
Right. I think there's a difference between a spin-off series and a limited series.
Very true.
Right? You could do a limited series of 6 episodes just to do a story, which I think would be great for some of the stuff. And there's also a difference between introducing something like Thrawn, which, is a big enough character that we think we need either, something pretty massive out of that, if not a whole series, a pretty extensive limited series, versus Gideon, who is there just in this context of this story for the Mandalorian, and he's going to go away at some point. That storyline will end with this. Bo-Katan, either way, I think it's probably better as part of the Mandalorian because I think they fit. Not necessarily for a new series for them. But Ahsoka, doing her own thing, that needs to be a series. That needs to be something separate from this. So there's that kind of interaction too. What we're going to get in the next 3 episodes and what we're going to be, staged for next season or other limited series, your guess is good as mine. I mean, we're all just...
They're making the wait for season 3 far more painful than the wait for season 2 was already. Like, we're not even at the end of the season, and we already know, oh my gosh, Dave, you're killing us.
Well, can you imagine if
we're going to get some answers before the end of season 3? I hope we're getting some things kind of wrapped up a little bit, but also opening up to or at least seeing the path where we're going to go.
Yeah, we're getting movement,
and that'll feel good.
Can you imagine if the last episode they go to Tython, they go to this Seeing Stone or whatever it is, they do their thing, nothing happens. Mando is like, well, kid, it's it's going to be you and me for a while, and then he gets a hologram, like gets hailed. And it's Ezra or something like that, seeking out his coordinates. And then it just cuts and it's the credits.
Yeah, I totally believe we're going to get that. So, but that brings up, Tim brings up a really good point about this. And I think that's important to keep in mind. So I'm kind of in my own head trying to figure out, okay, what needs to stay here? What is likely to get spun off? There's been so much, again, this is all speculation, but there's been so much talk about a Boba Fett miniseries. We're getting a Kenobi 4-episode miniseries. That's confirmed.
Yeah,
I can see getting a 4-episode Boba Fett miniseries. And the talk behind the scenes is that this is very much going to be a miniseries. It's not going to be an ongoing series. So I think we can set that aside. Yeah, it's going to be just a one-off thing. For an ongoing series, if you are going to make Grand Admiral Thrawn Ahsoka's quest, that is all massive enough with such fan investment. That is an ongoing series right there. So I think the Ahsoka series as an ongoing interest with Thrawn as the antagonist, I think that my prediction is that that's a given. And plus, I mean, Filoni on a personal level has invested so much in Ahsoka. I really, truly believe we are going to get an Ahsoka series. And there's a good likelihood that it will be going after Thrawn. I think if Ezra gets introduced, we will probably also see Ezra as part of that series. I think Ezra will probably end up taking and training Grogu. So Grogu might also appear in the Ahsoka series. And again, we go back to, from a marketing point of view, if you spin something off and you can get Grogu in there, my mom is going to watch it. My next door neighbor is going to watch it because it's got Baby Yoda, right? I mean, it's an immediate marketing guarantee.
First of all, Ezra couldn't train a dog.
Not my problem.
So I think that unless there has been some sort of really, really exponential character growth in Ezra, if it ends up being Ezra, I'm going to be kind of annoyed.
We need an animated series that covers Ezra and Thrawn in the unknown regions when they pop out at the end of Rebels, and maybe we would get
slapping each other aboard the Star Destroyer.
Maybe we would get that character development
There has been a lot of setup for the whole Thrawn thing, and which is why I'm actually convinced that there's still a lot of potential for this to go to the big screen, because the fundamental setup for Thrawn is for some threat in the unknown regions. That has been the persistent thing with Thrawn, and his whole reason for coming to the Empire. So,
and when they've been talking about it, the next movie trilogy, they've been talking about something that is set outside of what we've already seen from Star Wars in a different area, different characters. That, I mean, Unknown regions. That's exactly.
But yeah, but bringing things back to the Mandalorian, and this is something else I put in Discord yesterday. There is a Grogu problem. There is seriously a problem.
A big one.
Because one, how do you get rid of this character? Two, at this point, can you get rid of this character? If Baby Yoda is no longer on The Mandalorian, 1/3 of all the people watching the show gone. They will vanish. I mean, am I making an unreasonable statement?
No, and this was the huge problem that I think they've tripped into with the decision to place the sequel trilogy where it is, to have the storyline be what it was, and involve all of these original trilogy characters. I think that decision was likely, just a grab at nostalgia.
Oh, sure.
But now, even though it's 30 years seems like a long time, it's not. And so you've got to find a way, not just to deal with what Tim's saying, because I think that's a huge problem for this series going forward and other series. But then you watch the sequel trilogy and you're like, where are all these folks?
Right.
And there's a way to do that in a
Unknown
way
regions.
to explain it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're shoving everybody off into, I know it's a big galaxy, but the way that the First Order and Palpatine in the Rise of Skywalker is presented, it's this existential threat to the galaxy.
Yeah,
you would expect everybody to Luke being sort of the exception in how he approached things. You expect everybody to buck up, and
if it's such a big threat, how come only 4 people know about it?
Right.
that's the other thing.
So it's
Well, I think that for this show, and we're going to go wild with speculation and stuff in 4 weeks when there's no longer new content out, right? And we're going to get the Disney Gallery
3
stuff.
or 4 episodes of us.
So this is definitely something that we're going to revisit, probably quite a bit. But my prediction,
we're going to have a lot. We're going to continue on with Outer Rim, even once this season is
The Outer
done.
Rim is not about the Mandalorian.
We're still going to be talking about a lot.
This is going to be when the Kenobi series comes out. We'll shift our focus to that. In between, when there are no Disney Plus series, we're going to be talking about just long form Star Wars topics. We'll be talking about the High Republic. We will be talking about other areas of world building within Star Wars. We'll bring people on to interview them about cosplay or, whatever. The Outer Rim is not a Disney Plus show, and it's not a Mandalorian show. It is a long form discussion show covering different things about Star Wars. Not just the content, but also of fandom, etc. So Echo Base is the Star Wars news show, which if you're not watching that, you should be. And then Outer Rim is for more topical stuff and discussions. But for The Mandalorian, for the rest of this season, my prediction is that Tython is going to be one of the big storylines. I feel like they have to do something more with Gideon. They've teased him just enough. There has to be a little bit more movement with Gideon. And I'm guessing they're going to go to Tython. Gideon is going to show up there because he's hunting them. So it's not going to be like there's
a tracker on the Razor Crest.
Right.
He knows exactly where they are.
They're not just going to walk into Tython and walk up to the temple and say, wow, it's a nice day out today. No, there's going to be a conflict at Tython. It's probably going to involve Gideon. Bo-Katan's probably going to show up and kind of take care of some of the Gideon issue while Din Djarin gets Grogu up. A year ago, I would have never known I would say a sentence like that because none of those names would have made any sense. But take him up to the Seeing Stone or whatever. I think we're going to get that. I don't think we're going to get a lot of development. I don't even think the Darksaber is necessarily going to change hands, but I think there's going to be some movement toward that. And then I think we're probably going to get Ezra, but I don't think we're going to get any more Ahsoka this season, honestly. I think we've seen what we saw of her.
I hope we don't. And that goes to Lou's repeated point in terms of, I think that would just fundamentally shift the focus of this show, and I don't want it to do that. We are absolutely money down now that we are seeing a duel between Mando and Gideon with the Darksaber facing off against that Beskar pike that he just picked up from the magistrate. That is happening.
Yeah.
And it's going to be amazing.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's. I think that one of the cliffhangers is going to be Ezra, and I think the other cliffhanger is going to be the Dark Troopers. I think that's going to.
Now, just out of curiosity, and not to, I know we're running long already, but where is the Ezra thought coming from? What makes you so confident in that?
So it's a combination of a couple things. Number one, there are just so few Jedi. What Ahsoka said was meant to be a tease. You know, a Jedi will find you, or they won't, because there aren't that many left. So no, it means that that's going to be what happens when he goes and meditates there. I mean, it's foreshadowing. Number one. Number two, of the options, there aren't that many. There's Luke, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Luke's going to appear in the series." I don't think they're going to do that. I really don't think we're going to see Luke.
I don't think he will either.
I hope
and
not.
So, who else does that leave left at this point? I mean, again, we're post Return of the Jedi. There's Luke, Ahsoka, and Ezra. And that's
you've
it.
got Leia, depending on what her status of training is at this point,
Yeah.
which probably isn't
Probably
that far.
not enough that she would.
The other thing,
Yeah, Lou?
well, I was going to say the other thing we don't know about, and this opens up to more stuff I don't want to see. It's just more characters, but we don't know anything about Luke's Jedi Academy or his training facility, whatever he did, besides the fact that he screwed up with Ben. Who else was there? Was there any?
That's a good question.
Did he know anybody? Did he find him?
But I think
so
that's
they could bring in another character entirely.
true. They could, but I also think that that's further down the chronology, timeline wise, and they would have been younger, and they wouldn't have been skilled enough to go. I mean, like if Luke did that and went to recruit Grogu for the Academy, then yeah, we could see Luke maybe, and Luke could take him into that direction. But then that's a big commitment to answer questions about what happened to Grogu in the Academy that Ben Solo basically ripped to shreds, and where is Grogu now? Like, it introduces so many questions that tie directly to the sequel trilogy. And I firmly believe, and we can discuss this later on too, I firmly believe that Lucasfilm, I mean, they're fully aware of the fan backlash. I think they're trying to distance themselves a bit from the sequel trilogy right now. And I think they're waiting for that to calm down, and they're hoping that, after the dust settles a few years down the road, maybe they can get some more stories out of that. But right now, they are actively covering time periods that you would think that they'd be very invested in the sequel trilogy era right now, and they're not. They're staying away from it.
And they're obviously going to try not to conflict with that either.
Right.
True.
Right.
So they don't want to set while there are things that may leave questions open, which quite honestly, there's questions that we already have.
There's a focus on Grogu right now. There's a focus on Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
They don't want to take that focus and redirect it back to the sequel trilogy again right now.
Right. And I think there's also just a practical problem. They've committed to not digitally de-aging Leia anymore. So you're not gonna get her, and they're certainly not gonna replace her for this show and have somebody else just play the role of Leia. You're not going to, I think it would be weird to have Luke be de-aged like that. Maybe Mark Hamill would be on board with it, but it would just be Uncanny Valley City, I think, even with the best of technology. So I don't think we're going to see Luke. And then you get down to the fact that of the Jedi who survived the Purge, that was a while ago. A lot of time has passed. So many of those Jedi are quite old now, or, much older. And they have this established history with Ezra. He's young. He's got training. They spent a good deal of time developing his character in Rebels, and he's been sort of out of the loop for a while, and he's tied directly to Thrawn in terms of their fate.
Has been tested both in that final episode of Rebels, but then probably the entire dealings that he had with Thrawn after that. So he's gone through some sort of a gauntlet.
And so he's a familiar enough character like Ahsoka that they can bring him in. A core of the fan base that were fans of Rebels will be all into it. It will get others into that show, or they'll just at least understand it. The other fact is they've killed off a lot of the other Jedi that survived the Purge within the comics and like the Fallen Order video game. I mean, I suppose you could get somebody like Cal Kestis from Fallen Order that would come in, but I just, for whatever reason, I have this inkling that it's going to be Ezra for those.
I hope not.
And part of me wants to say the other side of this could be the fact that we don't get any of that. Nobody answers the call. When he brings him to the Seeing Stone or whatever.
Very true.
And it's just him and Mando as a buddy cop show, or two men and a baby, or three men and a one Mandalorian and a kid type thing. It could go that way.
has about 50% of my bet.
Okay.
Or he just refuses. Yeah, he just, not only does nobody answer, he just decides that it's not right for the kid. He reflects on what Ahsoka said. I think it's fascinating, not to dive us down another rabbit hole, but this implication that your connection to the Force can wane and disappear if not nurtured and maintained, because Ahsoka tells him to just let his connection fade. He'll be safer that way. Yeah. And that's a distinct possibility. He doesn't have the ability to do any of that training, and so maybe they just go off right into the sunset together.
Ezra shows up and then joins the show, and we keep the kid.
More of a chance of him joining the Ahsoka show.
I agree.
But you could have Din taking the child later on, and maybe the child goes a little dark. Not Sith dark, but the kid's working with Mando now, doing bounty hunting, and he's a little bit, a little bit on the dark side and hurting people and helping Din out. Maybe that's what we get.
Well, we are at an hour and a half.
Next time they encounter,
go ahead.
Next time they encounter a mudhorn, Grogu not only levitates it, but then just snaps its neck,
picks it up and throws it at someone.
I got this one, Dad.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. There's a lot to think about, and we are definitely going to have to revisit this later on, because there's a lot to unpack. This is a very dense episode, and like you said, Lou, there's a lot to get to in these next 3 episodes. I don't think we're going to get to all of it. I think we're going to get to enough, and I think it's going to be a very frustrating wait for season 3. But we've got other shows on the way too. We've got the Cassian Andor show. We've got the Kenobi show. We may or may not have a Boba Fett miniseries. Hopefully, unlike last time around, we will have some things to tide us over in the downtime between seasons 2 and 3. But that's going to do it for this episode. We are going to be back next weekend with more content. I think we might have to shift our recording schedule a little bit, because I'm going to be working at this time next weekend. So we might have to do a Friday night recording if you guys are up for it. But we will see.
I can make it happen.
Either way, that's going to do it. Thank you for hanging out in the chat room with us, everybody. We're glad that you spent your Saturday morning here with our bright, shining faces. Our condolences. And to everybody listening on the podcast, thank you for listening as well. If you'd like to watch the YouTube video, go to randomchatter.com/YouTube. There's a subscribe button down below. There's a little thumbs up button you can click to like the video. And also, we would love it if you'd join us in Discord. Our Mandalorian channels. We just added a new one yesterday, in fact, because the Mandalorian Spoilers channel, which all of our Patreon people have access to, even if you just donate $1, like that gets you access to a whole bunch more of our Discord server, kind of as a special thank you to our members. But yeah, the Mandalorian Spoilers channel has blown up. And so what we did is we split off another channel. We've got Mandalorian Speculation to talk about the Thrawn stuff and Ezra, and looking back over things covered in the Clone Wars and what the implications are there for what might come in the future. And that way it kind of separates those like really deep, long discussions from things like, hey, this episode was really cool and Ahsoka was really awesome. Because there's a lot of that going on too. So that's something we do with our Discord server. As you guys tend to blow up certain channels, we spawn new areas for people to continue those discussions as needed, and then we trim back later if we have to. But we have a very lively Discord server that we would love for you to come join us. So go to randomchatter.com/Discord for an invite link, and that'll pop you right into the server. And we've got channels dedicated to each of the shows on the network. So head into the Outer Rim channel as well, and let us know what you thought of this episode of The Outer Rim. That is going to do it, though, for this week. So have a great weekend. And we will see you again for the next episode of The Mandalorian here on the Outer Rim. Take care.